Welcome to our second virtual workshop for our Firewise residents. Today is all about spreading our message and building our Firewise communities. It's great to see so many returning faces, plus I see we have some new ones on the line, which is also great. As a reminder for those not actively engaged with us, we are HWMO, Hawaiʻi Wildfire Management Organization. We're a nonprofit located in Waimea on the Big Island, and today's workshop is being supported by our partners, Fire Adapted Communities Learning Network, and coalitions and collaboratives, along with our state legislature. So big thank you to them for their ongoing support. For those new to Zoom, please be sure to keep yourselves muted if there's any background noise taking place. Make note of the chat box for all questions or comments, and you can use this throughout the entire workshop. And if there are any questions we don't get to, we will be sure to follow up with you. And we also love to see your faces, and there's a lot of good-looking Firewise community residents out there, so feel free to use your webcam if you can. Also, today's workshop is being recorded. All right, so some introductions. I am Carson Magoon, HWMO's Community Education Coordinator. I also serve as the coordinator for the statewide Firewise program. As most of you know, I am your main point of contact. And we also have Nani Bretto on the call. She serves as HWMO's co-executive director and helps oversee the Firewise program alongside me. Nani, can you give our friends a wave?
Thanks,
And
Carson.
what about you guys? Hi. And so what about you guys? Let's spend a minute or two seeing who else is on the line. And please use your chat box and type your name and the name of your Firewise community.
Thanks, Carson. Yeah, and for those that haven't chatted before, there's an icon on the bottom there. And if you click on it, a chat box should open up, and please check out who else is on the line, and be sure to introduce yourselves as well. I see there's lots of names coming through, and based on registration numbers, we had 45 folks register for the event, and it looks like right now we have about 32 participants on the call. So that's great, and I'll slowly let more people join us as they enter the waiting room. And Carson, by the way, we ended up having 13 Firewise communities represented in our registration number. So we have almost everybody, all of our different Firewise communities represented on this call.
That's great. That's really great. That's like almost 90%.
Yeah, and it's growing. Yep.
Really good.
Yep.
Awesome. All right, so a little bit about what to expect today. The overall purpose is to share and learn new strategies and approaches for getting the word out about your Firewise program and building your Firewise network within your community. We broke up the agenda into 5 parts, so we'll spend the first 15 minutes walking you through a framework in which outreach can be viewed and applied. Then we'll have one of our Firewise communities share what their outreach efforts have looked like in the past. Then we saved a big chunk of time where you guys can connect and share together in smaller groups, followed by a quick 5-minute wrap up. We also want to invite you to stick around after the meeting, where we will be available for additional discussions. And if you connect with someone during the meeting, you can use this time to continue connecting.
Yeah, by the way, just to mention, that was sort of a follow-up from the last workshop that we gave. A lot of you guys connected in your small groups, and we brought you back to the main group without giving you time to say proper goodbyes, and a lot of you wanted to keep talking. So in response to that, we saved some time at the end, and you guys can continue connecting and sharing if that happens.
Great. Thanks, Nani. So before we get too deep into it, we want to hear from you in terms of what extent your Firewise community is doing outreach and education within your program. So Nani, would you mind launching the poll?
Sure. So I'm launching it now, and you guys should see a question pop up, and the question is, to what extent is your community doing outreach and education? And if you would, there's 4 options. If you would select the one that fits your response the best, you can choose either a lot, somewhat, not so much, or very rarely, or never. And I see people submitting their responses. They're coming in slowly. Give you another second to answer that. Again, you can only click on one radio button, and don't forget to submit it. Great. Okay, I'm going to share that poll and we can see the results there. By the way, for those watching the recording, you cannot see the poll. So I'll let you know what it says. Wow, so it looks like it's a good mix of folks. We have about half of you are doing outreach and education somewhat, a little bit of a lot, and the other half not so much, and some very rarely. So this is a good mix. I like this because half of you will have information and experiences to share with us, and the other half will have a lot of information to learn along the way to bring back to your community. So this is great. Thank you for sharing. Okay, Carson, let's move on to the next screen. Before, I want to start off with us all being on the same page in terms of what outreach means. And so it's pretty much what it sounds like. It's reaching out to build awareness and to share information about your Firewise program with the people in your community. It's targeted communication by your Firewise team. If you could go to the next screen, Carson. Targeted communication with your community to meet a particular goal. And to be targeted, it's going to require knowing and understanding different audiences and strategizing how to best reach them. So now, with that said, I'm going to walk you through sort of a framework or a guide for how you can come up with outreach strategies. I'm calling this Devising Great Firewise Outreach Strategies That Win Big. Got to have a plan. Me and Carson are slowly learning this. Without a plan, projects can either fall short of expectations or sometimes they can fail altogether. So we don't want to be caught off unprepared. But do remember, a guide is just a guide. Each community is different and each project over time will look different. So take what you want from the framework and leave what doesn't work. So the first step is setting goals, being clear with one another and as a team in terms of what you hope to accomplish with your outreach efforts. There's a few examples on the screen. The next one is knowing your target audience. So creating a list of stakeholders. Your primary audience for your outreach will be your community, the residents in your neighborhood. However, don't forget about the folks that influence those folks, and we call those the secondary stakeholders. These can be individuals like community leaders, kupuna, faith leaders, those sorts of individuals. The third step, and this is a big one, is developing the strategy. How are you going to get the word out about your program? The next screen has some examples, things like community meetings, organizing and participating in events, canvassing or going door to door, developing and hosting targeted presentations and workshops, doing community work days. More on the next screen, we have signage, brochures, and flyers, tapping into existing structures like homeowners associations, using blast emails or direct mailings. Some folks incorporate information into new resident packets or welcome kits. And of course, doing site visits, having that one-on-one contact with residents. So all of these strategies will give you opportunities to talk more about your Firewise program, sort of generate interest in it, and hopefully build community support for it. Another poll, let's see. What does your Firewise team currently use for your outreach and education? So I'm going to launch another poll. And here are your responses, your options. And you can check all that apply. There's newsletters, there's social media, emails, HOA or other community meetings, one-on-one visits, welcome kits or orientation kits, or something else. And if there's something else, please feel free to use that chat box and let us know what other strategies you're using. Okay, I'll give you another couple seconds before I share the results. And again, you can check all that apply. Okay, I'm going to share those results. And here we go. Oh, we're pretty heavy on the newsletters and the HOA community meetings. Nobody's doing the welcome or orientation kits. Looks like some of you are doing the one-on-one visits. So it's kind of scattered here and there throughout. Anything in the chat box, Carson, for other things that people are doing?
No, I was kind of expecting to see like driving the neighborhood with a megaphone, like, you know, updating the residents, but that didn't pop up. So
Nobody was
maybe
brave enough to to share
that
that
one,
one with us.
that one's to come in the future, maybe.
Okay, great. Well, let's move on to step 4 in our framework, and that's figuring out who's going to execute the outreach strategy, and that's building your outreach team. So Firewise committees, they might decide to start a smaller subcommittee specifically for outreach activities. Or maybe your team will recruit a few resident volunteers to help you specifically with this task. So there's different ways to do it, but you definitely want a designated outreach team that's focused on outreach efforts. And don't forget the added benefits you get from partnering up with other existing organizations or networks in your community, especially those that are already doing outreach and engagement activities. Okay, the next step. So there's 2 more before you can feel comfortable that you have a thorough outreach plan in place. And the 5th one is crafting and refining your message. So your message is your first touch point with your community, and because that's the case, you want to make sure you make a strong first impression. A weak generic one tends not to hold much water, and it won't be as impactful, and it's even likely to be ignored. So tailor your info to the people you're targeting by using language that they're familiar with. And it's, this is an important step, and you want to make sure that you communicate in a manner that's relatable to your community. If your words come across as, too sales pitchy, it might put some folks off. So remember, it's not a sales pitch. Your friends and neighbors should be able to clearly connect with your work and should be motivated to act in favor of it. And how you communicate plays a big role in this. So your communication should be articulate and it should be consistent so that over time, people come to recognize the Firewise work and are familiar with it. The last and final step is to tailor the message across channels. There's a wide range of channels you can use for getting your message out, but the tool you use really does depend on who you're targeting, since different media are going to appeal to different sets of people. So each channel has pluses and minuses. Just be sure to consider multiple channels in your plan. Here are some examples of different channels that folks use in our Firewise communities. Social media, a lot of folks are using, Facebook. What do you use, Carson, for our social media?
Yeah, we have Instagram, Twitter, and we have a LinkedIn that's not super popular, but we do try to stay updated on a bunch of different channels since we do have partners. But I understand that if you're a smaller group or smaller organization, sometimes having too many channels can get overwhelming. So it can be helpful just to have your 1 or 2 go-to channels so that everyone knows how to find you.
Yeah, a lot of people have, they put together flyers or brochures. We've helped communities do that. There's your traditional media, like your direct mailings or email blasts. Of course, there's just phone calls, text messaging for those that don't access emails very often, or social media. So lots of different examples of different channels. Final tip on the next screen, Carson. So I like to think about zones when we think about our outreach efforts. While community outreach, it might seem like a daunting task at times, and maybe you don't even know where to start, try thinking about it in terms of zones or levels. Like each zone can be assigned with a task, and the complexity of the task increases with the zone number. For example, here we have zone 1 being more of the easy tasks, like creating and distributing fact sheets to all of your residents, or creating an online presence and engaging on social media. And then we have zone 2, which is slightly more difficult. For example, developing and presenting at a HOA or community meeting, or hosting a neighborhood educational event or booth. And then we have zone 3, which are the more difficult tasks. For example, being trained on how to conduct home assessments, or coordinating and hosting a community workday. So the main advantage of this system is it lets you work with a simple task in the beginning. And as you're successful and you gain confidence over time, you can move on to those bigger ones. So don't be put off by not knowing what you should be doing. Start with the simple, low-hanging fruit items. Another concept I want you to consider, and that's community engagement. And this is a little bit different than outreach. When you're planning and doing your outreach, it's super beneficial and complementary to outreach, is to incorporate engagement into your plan. And it's distinctly different, but they're not mutually exclusive, and they should be treated as partners and building upon one another. So we define engagement as building relationships, and I like to say trusting relationships with people in your community, empowering them to take ownership of their resources. And there's a table here that sort of outlines the differences between community outreach and community engagement. Outreach is more short-term, educational, transactional, whereas engagement on the right side is more long-term, more about relationship building, and it's not transactional, but it connects people. The next screen, what is the main objective of engagement? It really is to build trust. You can have the best project or the best message in the world, but if you're not trusted, it doesn't really matter. Nobody listens. So engagement is the root of how we build this trust. And it's not a process. It's more of a process and not so much an outcome. There's different types of engagement, different levels of engagement, and the range starts at a minimal level of engagement, which doesn't take much effort, but doesn't build as much trust. And it moves downwards to higher levels of engagement, which takes more effort and yields more trust. So the first one there is to inform, keeping residents informed of what's happening, of their risks. Moves to consult, which is keeping residents informed, but also answering their questions. The third type, again, you're increasing your levels of engagement as we move down the table, is to involve. So that's ensuring that resident concerns are reflected in the project. You're providing feedback on how their input influences the project. To collaborate, which is incorporating their recommendations into the project decisions to the maximum extent possible. And the last and final is empower. So that's implementing what the residents decide. So again, these are different levels of engagement. And final reminder, outreach is really all about human relationships, nurturing those positive, collaborative, cooperative relationships, building trust, listening to our neighbors, being open to multiple perspectives. And then, you know, after we've established these positive and healthy relationships, can we move forward with doing what we think is the real work of keeping our neighborhoods wildfire prepared and resilient. So I want to do a time check because I want to make sure that that we're keeping you guys on track and respectful of your time. So Carson, I'm noticing we don't have much time for Q&As, but let's just let folks know that that chat box is always available. And I see questions in there, and some of them I so badly want to jump in on. But let's hold off and follow up with an email to folks on all of these questions. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, great. We'll definitely get all those questions answered.
Okay, cool.
All right. And so I would like to present the Firewise chairwoman of Hawaii's oldest Firewise community right now. Her name is Jane Mayo with Kohala by the Sea. Welcome, Jane.
Guys.
Hi. So as Kohala by the Sea just this past year celebrated their 15-year Firewise anniversary, congratulations. We are curious how your community was able to achieve this sort of success, and we're hoping to just like kind of learn from all of that experience that your community has earned over the years. So we're going to go into Kohala by the Sea's story, and if you wouldn't mind sharing some of the some of the story from Kohala by the Sea, as well as what outreach strategies have you tried and what has worked and what didn't work?
Carson, it's my pleasure to share our Firewise experience with you. And back about 17 years ago in 2003, several of our residents became aware of the Firewise program and saw how it could be beneficial for our community. By fall of 2004, they had completed the qualifications and were accepted by the NFPA program. At that time, there were very few homes on the 73 available lots, and not all of the homeowners were full-time residents. The main activity in those years was to have an annual workday to reduce the fire fuel on both empty lots and occupied lots. They did win some grants to fund their Firewise activities like cleaning out the vegetation in the gulches. Home assessments were done regularly when there were not so many homes. The committee remained at about 5 members with support of the HOA. At some point, several Firewise principles were added to the Kohala by the Sea CCNRs. Eventually, 2 conditions were relevant in making us realize that we needed a change in our workday process last year. Number 1, we now have close to 50 homes existing here, and number 2, we're all getting older. Instead of setting aside one day to have volunteers weed whacking and chainsawing in the hot sun, we moved to a system of homeowner responsibility, monitoring, and resolution. Now our committee reviews the community twice a year and sends letters to the homeowners about the risks that exist on their properties, and either they take care of it, which most do, or the HOA hires a contractor to resolve the risk issues. Thanks to the efforts started in 2003, now in 2020, there's much less fire fuel in the community, and our residents are much more aware of how Firewise principles can help them guard their assets.
Awesome. And what outreach strategies have you tried over the years?
Not real familiar with what they did in the past, other than the annual workday, which sometimes included a get-together afterward. There were also a few events, such as having the fire department come here to teach us how to use a fire hose on our fire hydrants. And I think they may have made 1 or 2 presentations about being Firewise. With the help of your organization, those pioneers also landed several grants critical to cleaning out the gulches and other projects. Luckily, in those days, there was a DOFA employee on the island, and she was very good about public relations and putting notices in the paper when we did something noteworthy, like our 10-year anniversary. However, she is no longer in that position, so our focus in that area has diminished. The current committee has established a monthly email blast system to keep our property owners aware of all kinds of information about living Firewise and other safety issues. We also give a report at all the HOA meetings, and we have Firewise posters, flyers, CDs, and other informational material that we distribute to attendees. We have attended seminars, conventions, and webinars. The committee has purchased informational banners to place on our street exit gates to remind residents of important Firewise practices like know your plan, practice your plan, change batteries in your fire alarms, review your automated call system procedures, and check your fire extinguishers, etc. The committee did create a welcome package that is given to all new property owners. We have tried sending self-assessment packages to property owners so they can do it at their leisure. Our HOA website includes a Firewise page. And we do an annual update, hard copy mailing, which consists of, number 1, updates on the automated calling system with instructions on the system. Number 2, our evacuation plan. Number 3, what to do if you can't evacuate. And number 4, instructions about finding more Firewise information on our website and on the web in general.
Great, thank you, Jane. It's really interesting to hear how your strategies have evolved over the years, and it's really great information. So we're all curious, what has worked and what hasn't worked?
From what I can read in our archives that I have, and from Talk Story with some of the founding members, most residents were regular volunteers at the work days and participated in the fire department events. Having the Firewise contact to help get the word out about accomplishments was helpful in relations with the fire department, I think. I could characterize our monthly email blast as a good idea because with current privacy laws, we are not allowed to just contact property owners directly unless there's something related to our community review. At least this way we know that they are all up to date on things that we can learn from the firewise.org or your organization. Not sure about the welcome package being a winner, but we do have to do it to make sure that the new owners are at least supplied with the information. Hopefully they read it and keep it handy. The self-assessment package was a total failure. Trying to get our residents to allow us to visit their home and do an assessment is also a loser for some reason. It is nice to have the Firewise information on our website, so it's available to property owners anytime, night or day. And the annual owner update gives the property owners a reminder of our efforts on their behalf and also gives them a handy manual of the most important information in the event of a fire.
Great. Wow. Thank you so much, Jane. It was great having you on the call today, and we really appreciate you sharing out.
I hope not everything that I'm worried, because I know I'm intimidated. I'm like, wow, they've done a lot of work in the past 15 years. But we should remind folks on the call that they have been around for 15 years. So they've had a lot of chances to test and try new things and have things, you know, fail and better things come available. So thank you, Jane, for sharing your story with us.
Yeah, and I agree. And it's also great that we have you with us here, Jane, as a resource, and all the other Firewise communities in the state that you can call on to ask for recommendations or, you know, ask them about their experiences, which is really cool. Okay, so next up is our small group activity. This is when we finally stop talking and instead let you guys
hey
get to hear from one another. What we're going to do is to break you up into groups of 3 and ask that you spend about 15 to 20 minutes discussing your experiences with community outreach as Firewise communities. Nani offered a framework for and some concepts around outreach and engagement. And now it's time for you to talk about how you've applied these concepts with your own communities, or maybe how you've come to apply them in the future now that you know a little bit more. We also ask that your group be prepared to report back to the larger group.
Yeah, so how this is going to work, and some of you might remember the breakout room function on Zoom. What we're going to do is send you off into breakout rooms. We do ask that you turn on or keep on your webcams. That way you can stay, it's just going to be small groups of 3. So that way you guys can introduce yourselves and then decide who's going to report back to the group. And what you report back is totally up to you. You're only going to have 2 minutes, so we'll have to keep it super brief. But mainly what we want you to do in the next 15 minutes is to discuss as a group your outreach and engagement strategies. So Carson, if you go to the next screen, I put a few guiding questions up there. So that is, let's see, which ones have you used or are you currently using? What works, what doesn't, maybe why? Which ones might be in store for you next? So again, these are just some guiding questions, but the point of the 15-minute breakout really is to get to know each other, start to share what you have done, what you would like to do, and maybe, you know, ask of each other lessons learned or best practices and that sort of thing. So we'll pop in and check on you just in case you get off course and need help redirecting. But again, you have until 12:45, so that's only 15 minutes. And then you'll be given, we'll ask that you give us a 2-minute share out of what you guys discussed. And if there aren't any questions, I'm going to set up the breakout rooms now. It's going to take me just a couple seconds. And by the way, if your discussions are cut short, remember that we're going to give you that opportunity at 1 to reconnect and continue talking if that's what you'd like. Carson, did I miss anything?
I don't believe so, but if you are watching the recording of this, you won't be able to see the breakout room discussions.
Right, they're not recorded.
Yeah.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope I didn't cut anybody's conversation too short like I did last time. Hopefully you guys had some good small group discussions. Feel free to use the little reaction button on the bottom. It gives you the option to do a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we still have about 10 minutes. We popped into 3 of the small groups and we asked you guys to share out loud. So if we didn't pop in your room, you are off the hook, at least in terms of taking the mic. But what we would like you to do, instead of sharing out loud, if you could use that chat box again and just bullet or outline some of the main talking points that you guys discussed. So we're going to go ahead and start with Group A and hear about your group's outreach strategies. And again, if you could keep it to 2 minutes, that would be great.
All right, everyone. So next steps, we're going to ask you to check your inbox for a follow-up email after this. It will have a copy of the presentation, the workshop recording, and quick and easy follow-up survey. So please complete that. Also, it will have a form that you can submit for your $100 shopping spree request form for the Firewise groups with 2 or more residents in attendance today. That's due by Friday, July 24th. And also stick around after this workshop for additional opportunities to learn and connect.
Okay, wrapping up here. So we tend to have the in-person workshops to do these sorts of things, and we're just gaining experience with this new virtual world. So we're trying to we're trying to see if what we do in person we can also pull off virtually. So in place of us standing up and holding hands and having a closing circle, I want us to use that same concept, and instead we're going to use the chat box and just type a couple words that describe your experience today. And as you do that, be sure to make note of other people's experiences as well. As you do that, I also just want to give another shout out to those that support us. We have three big groups that supported this work today, and that is the Fire Adapted Communities Learning Network, collaborations, coalitions and collaboratives, and our Hawaii State Grant and Aid Grant. Oh, I'm getting all warm and fuzzy, Carson, reading through the chat box. I know. I can't thank you guys enough. We had such a good turnout today. This is just the first of many opportunities to connect with you, and I hope you're inspired to continue connecting with us. Carson, thank you so much for the hard work you put into preparing for this workshop. The effort does not go unrecognized by me. This stuff takes time and energy and a big heart. So big shout out to you too.
You did a lot as well. And so thank you. Also,
Okay.
we're seeing that you all are really benefiting from being able to connect with each other in the chat box right now. And I think that's awesome that we are sort of getting to cross-pollinate some of our information that we have as Firewise communities. And some of that knowledge might really benefit you, the knowledge that maybe a different Firewise community has gleaned over the years. And so being able to share that, it looks like it's really a positive thing. So thank you all for being here today.
Look at that, it's right on time. It's 1 o'clock, so we timed that perfectly.
Perfect timing. Awesome.
All right, thanks you guys. Have a great weekend. Ahui ho.
Aloha.